Meditation in Self from Shinzen Young. Wow. Everyone has a sense of self, but upon careful investigation, we discover that this sense of self consists of ideas and body sensations which arise and fall moment by moment. Wow. Such ideas and body sensations might be described as self-referential, meaning that they relate to producing the sense of self. Oh yeah. Most spiritual traditions encourage some kind of letting go of the self or the ego. Buddhism in particular puts great emphasis on realizing no self. Whoa. Isn't that interesting? What does it mean to realize no self? Oh, who or what would be realizing it? Of course, it's a sort of a not a great way of thinking about it. Maybe I think I'm missing something there by thinking that way. It's more of a difference in resolution, maybe. If I say something like there is no self, and then the rebuttal or response would be that who's realizing it, or who's saying it, or who's seeing it. I think the point would be that the self, what we generally identify as the self, is not there. Not that there is nothing. Maybe there is something, someone, or whatever, however you want to put it, but it's not at all what we think of. Personally, I like to view this as a process of clarifying the sense of self. This clarification proceeds in two stages, corresponding to two meanings of the English word to clarify. Something becomes clear when it goes from being nebulous to being distinct. Okay, very cool. But also something becomes clear when it goes from being opaque to being transparent. Okay, nebulous, distinct, opaque, transparent. So we want to clarify the sense of self. See through the sense of self. So we may have a nebulous idea, a very vague sense of what we are, who we are, sense of ourselves. But if we clarify that sense of self, that gets us to know self. Interesting. And possibly increasing the transparency, lowering the opacity, also gets us to a sense of no self. I don't know if it's actually a sense of no self, but it gets rid of the sense of self. I wonder what else. See, I like this idea of clarifying the sense of self by making it more transparent. I like it simply because I'm drinking tea. And I like clear tea oftentimes. Through consistent practice, we can develop the skill of mindfulness, which allows us to detect with greater clarity the often nebulous self-referential ideas and body sensations as they arise in each act of perception. We also develop equanimity so we can allow these ideas and body sensations to expand and contract without suppression, interference, or clinging. Eventually, contact with the sense of self becomes so continuous that there is no time left to congeal or fixate. Wow. The sense then becomes clarified in the sense that it's no longer experienced as the opaque, rigid, ever-present entity, but rather as a transparent, elastic, vibratory activity. It loses thinginess. We realize that this is a verb, not a noun, a wave, not a particle. Yeah, I guess, interestingly enough, I guess this applies to everything. Almost everything. There's a thingness that appears to be there, and there's a sort of a lapse in our, not a lapse, but there's a bit of a there's a bit of baggage with the concept of thing that is completely uninvestigated. And I love the idea of attempting to get a little bit more clarity here. You know, things aren't like what are things? There seems to be many levels of thingness or existence-ness, or however we want to refer to it. And we sort of broadly categorize everything very loosely, unfortunately, not with a lot of clarity. So we might think of an electron or a quark. I'm going way fundamental here, way down science, physics. Quark, fundamental particles, all these things as a thing. They're a thing. But then we think about the combinations of these things as also things. So two up quarks and one down quark being a proton. We think of the proton as a thing. But the proton is not a thing. The proton is an activity between three different things. And the same thing when you have an atom, you have a proton, a neutron, and let's say one electron. We think of that as a thing. But it's not a thing. It's a relationship between multiple things. Three things. And I wouldn't... I would hesitate. I mean, I wouldn't actually call them all things. I'd say the electron is a thing. The electron is a thing, and the proton and the neutron are not quite things, but you know, whatever. In the loose language, they're things. And then together they form a process or something working together. And the weirdness, I guess, would be that you can exchange the electron and the atom remains the atom, right? You have a proton and a neutron hanging out together. Got an electron floating around doing its Bohr thing, you know? And we could just replace the electron. Maybe you can add an electron, maybe you can remove the electron altogether, and you still have a thing, the atom, the same atom. And we use these words, we use the word thing to describe this sort of broad, obviously it goes farther and farther into people and other concepts and things that get weirder. But they're so different, yet we sort of have the baggage that they are consistent or constant. We have the same baggage that we have with a single electron or single fundamental particle, which doesn't change, which is itself like fundamental. It's the ground level. It's foundational, and things don't switch out. Can't be replaced. You get what I mean? Yet we think of an atom which has removable electrons. We think of that as the same thing, and we think of people who have parts of their body come and go, I guess. Food intake, output, fat coming, going, skin cells, brain cells, memories, body sensations, all that stuff comes and goes, and we sort of have the same baggage as we have with the other things. So it would be interesting to clarify. We have better language around that. We don't. This elastic sense of self can freely contract down to zero. Wow. Then we realize the state of true peace and oneness with all things. It can also expand as a vibrant, zestful, deeply human yet non-substantial activity of individual personality. The former is no self in the sense of zero self. The latter is the sense of no self in the sense of no fixating on a thing called self. Imagine if you fully identified with nothing. Stop identifying with your body, stop identifying with your mind, stop identifying with anything, and solidify it. Freely contract down to zero. Yeah, that'd be interesting. According to this paradigm, in enlightenment, the unconsciousness and fixation associated with these ideas and the body's sensations, which produce a sense of self, get eliminated. Wow. Unconscious and fixation. So the unconsciousness and fixation associated with these ideas, they get eliminated. Interesting. Unconsciousness gets eliminated because you're conscious of it, sure. Fixation gets eliminated because you got this fluidity to contract all the way down or expand infinitely. The sense of self becomes a home rather than a prison. You can come and go freely. I wish there were a little bit of even more clarity on what sense of self here means. Does he mean the sense of self as you think of it now, the sort of nebulous, not well-defined, you, me, or whatever, that sense of self is a home, not a prison? Or does he mean the sense of self which can expand and which can contract? The abstracted sense of self as he's defining it in a different way. I'm not sure which one he's referring to as being a home but not a prison. I assume it's the one that, the nebulous one that we sort of take for granted, or that one. Your typical sense of self is accessible. You can always go back to it. You can always go back to that resolution to see you as you think of you. But you can freely go back and forth, expanding or contracting, possibly. But you may ask, who becomes free? What observes the idea and body sensations? I asked that question earlier. Such questions arise from two sources. One is a perceptual and the other is linguistic. Yeah, I think it's more of a linguistic for me. These two are consistently reinforcing each other, resulting in deeper and pervasive confusion. Ordinarily, each act of perception is accompanied by a new burst of self-referential ideas and body sensations. Because for most people, the ideas and body sensations are both indistinct and congealed, they produce this sense of a thing called the doer or the perceiver. The perception or doer, or the perception of a doer or a perceiver is, as entity, becomes ensconced in the grammatical structure of the human speech as substantialist pronouns. Okay, interesting. Thus, the perception of the self as a thing is reinforced with almost every utterance that we speak. True. But see, this is the question. Do we actually want better language? Would that be helpful? I'm not sure. I guess it could be an interesting sort of thing. So we've got perceptual and linguistic. Okay, he didn't describe those though. No, he described linguistic. Okay. It is for this reason that questions like, what does the observant and who gets enlightened seem natural and yet so difficult to answer? Grammatically, interrogative pronouns who what must be answered with substantial nouns, this and that. The point, in this point, in fact, there is no thing meditates or gets wisdom. Rather, the skills of mindfulness and equanimity become so strong and habitual that they seep around the edges and soak into the ideas and body sensations that are producing the sense of I and practicing the meditation. Yeah, who gets enlightenment? Who gets enlightened? It's not, there's no fundamental particle of enlightenment. There's no fundamental foundational base of where the enlightenment comes, but there's a process which happens, and we might consider that process the person, and that is where the expression of enlightenment arises, based on particular habit patterns. Oh, that's it. I didn't clarify anything. What the heck? Let's think about that, all right? Let's also remember thinking is half of the issue. He said it there, linguistically, perceptually. The issue, I think, with thinking would be that we sort of have this hierarchy of a typical style of thought. In fact, the way that we use the word thought, it pretty much means this particular style of thought, linear, logical thinking. And we have this lack of clarity within the word of within the ideas of what thingness is. Thing is so broad that it refers to something that is foundational, fundamental, can't change, and also to systems which have interchangeable fundamental particles moving in and out. Not at all clear at all. The word is way too broad. It needs to be a little bit more narrow. But unfortunately, our thoughts are caught up in that not very clear stage. So when we think, we sort of fall back into that lack of clarity, unfortunately. But we're going to try to think about it. What does the observing? Who gets enlightened? Who becomes free? What observes body sensations? So what does it is there's some process that does the observing. I think that's how we would think of it. Who gets enlightened? There's a process that expresses the enlightenment. Who becomes free? Same. When we can see a little bit of a higher resolution, we can see that all the particles are coming in and out and flowing freely, and those particles are a process that make up us. And of course, the particles of our being in this sense, body sensations. What are they? Consistent ideas, of ideas and body sensations. Yeah, so those ideas may come and go, and those body sensations may come and go, and we sort of think of the process of the self-contained thing, but it's not. It's like thinking of a tornado as a thing, when a tornado is really lots of stuff coming in and then going out, and it's this process of spinning around, but none of the things, like none of the actual, you've got tree branches and I don't know, houses and cows. Got a ridiculous idea of a tornado in my mind here, but all those things sort of are coming in and flowing out, but none of those things, those are like solid things in this analogy, but the tornado is like a collection, a process of those things flowing in, flowing away. And I think it's an error, or at least a lapse in our language, to consider that tornado a thing and to consider the things that make up the tornado a thing also. This is a part of the linguistic problems that we perpetuate, this sense of self. Tragic.